To our monitors and the Middle East, where in southern Israel, I should say, at least 4 people were killed in a missile strike from Iran. It came just hours before President Trump announced a fragile ceasefire is in effect after nearly 2 weeks of war between Israel and Iran. Now, CBS News has learned the president spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about keeping the ceasefire intact. In that conversation, it happened after Israel launched an attack on Tehran, killing hundreds of Iranian security forces. Israel ordered those strikes after a missile launched by Iran landed in Israeli territory. There were no casualties or damage. Trump had this to say about the fragile situation between Israel and Iran before leaving for the NATO summit in the Netherlands.
I didn't like the fact that Israel unloaded right after we made the deal. They didn't have to unload. And I didn't like the fact that the retaliation was very strong. But in all fairness, Israel unloaded a lot. And now I hear Israel just went out because they felt it was violated by one rocket that didn't land anywhere. That's not what we want, I'll tell you. And I'm telling you, I'm not happy about that, Israel, either.
Let's turn now to Alex Plitsas. He is a former Pentagon official and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Alex, thank you for your time today. In your opinion, in your expertise, do you think this ceasefire can actually hold?
Well, I think it'll hold, but it's a ceasefire to the current round of hostilities. I mean, we've been at this in the shadows with the Iranians and the regime for decades. I mean, from the time of taking over the embassy in '79 to kidnapping our station chief, the bombing of the Marine barracks, and it goes on all the way through Iraq, hundreds of troops killed from lethal aid, up through the events of 10/7 and afterwards. So this is a literal end to the current round of hostilities, but the issues and the underlying factors are not resolved by this.
Yeah, and so based on you just saying that the issues are not resolved, how great of a concern is retaliation from Iran or its proxies?
So that's a great question. So I think, what we saw yesterday was a very clear indication from the Iranians that they were looking for an off-ramp. They'd had enough for right now. They launched a very small attack, let everybody know ahead of time it was coming. They still launched ballistic missiles. But they also had done the same when we were in Iraq and we had killed Soleimani, one of the IRGC leaders at that time. And when President Trump didn't respond to that because the strike was ineffective, I think it told the Iranians from informed history that if they were to structure something similar now, that's an off-ramp that they could use to sort of save face. And that appears to be what happened yesterday.
And I want to ask you about this because after the India-Pakistan crisis back in May, you wrote that the U.S. needed to stop Iran's nuclear rise. So with the strikes on its facilities, when will we most likely know if the U.S. actually succeeded with those strikes?
It's a great question. My understanding, based on discussions with both Israelis and U.S. officials in the Pentagon and the intelligence community, is that those assessments are underway. Fordo itself, which was the main facility that was struck of the 3 the B-2s hit, was a deep buried facility specifically designed to sustain, strikes or withstand them rather. And it's hard to tell only from the air, so there's more testing that's going on. And we also know that there were somewhere between 15 to 16 trucks that were spotted on satellite imagery leaving facilities on the Wednesday before the attacks. So it's unclear at this point if any of the highly enriched uranium left the facilities. And so both of those questions remain open at this point. Until they're both answered, it's hard to declare, the operation either as a success or a failure.
Yeah, and just how surprised are you by everything you've seen in this region in just the last couple of weeks?
I mean, there were a number of surprising things. I think the most surprising was just how well planned and prepared the Israelis were to conduct this operation. I mean, there was a New York Times leak that happened that the operation had been given the green light in May, and then the president pulled back after Vice President Vance and DNI Gabbard basically said, hey, let's give negotiations a chance. I'd heard the same from administration officials over the last few months that was in fact the case. And in order to do that, the Israelis would have had to hold all those assets that they had pre-planned for an additional couple of months. And if you think about it, the secrecy that needed to be maintained for that, they built, covert drone bases inside of Iran, remote missile launchers. There were clandestine or covert paramilitary operations on the ground, in addition to 200 aircraft on the opening strike. They had to have intelligence on the 15 scientists that they struck, their location at that moment, as well as national security figures that they struck who were responsible for command and control for retaliatory options. So a very coordinated and synchronized effort that would have taken a very long time to plan. So that was, I think, quite surprising. And then also how quickly they were able to take everything down. But in reality, this is all the after effects of the dominoes from 10/7. Once Hezbollah's ballistic missile stock was gone from southern Lebanon, it really removed a big deterrent from the Israelis from striking. Then the Assad regime falls. Then the Iranians launched missiles at Israel, and in response, they took out the S-300 advanced air defense systems inside of Iran, which effectively left them blind. So they had a limited ability to strike back. The deterrent is gone. They're no longer blind. The Iranians completely misread the signs, and then they got caught conducting clandestine nuclear activity, and it pretty much opened up the opportunity for the Israelis to get to yes, and that's where we find ourselves.
That is, in fact, where we find ourselves. Alex Plitsas, thank you so much for your insight and for joining us today. Appreciate it.